I'm sitting here staring at this termination letter, and I still can't believe it. The letterhead says Rosewood Catering and Events, in that fancy script my Aunt Carmen always loved. Below it, in cold black ink, it says my employment has been terminated effective immediately due to performance issues and company restructuring needs. Performance issues. That's what she called my pregnancy. I keep thinking about how excited I was when I first got the job at Carmen's company 3 years ago. She was my mom's older sister, the successful one who built this catering business from nothing in Phoenix. Growing up, Carmen was like this shining example of what a woman could accomplish. She never had kids of her own, poured everything into the business instead. My mom always said Carmen was too focused on work to settle down, but I admired that about her. She seemed so independent, so strong. When I graduated from Arizona State with my business degree, Carmen offered me a position as her operations coordinator. I was thrilled. Finally, a chance to work with family, to learn from someone I looked up to. The pay was decent, and Carmen promised me I'd have real growth opportunities. She said she saw potential in me, that maybe someday I could even become a partner in the business. Those first 2 years were good, really good. I threw myself into the work, managing vendor relationships, coordinating events, handling the books. Carmen seemed pleased with my performance. She'd tell clients I was her right-hand woman and joked that she didn't know how she'd managed without me. I felt proud, like I was finally proving myself as an adult. But looking back now, I can see the cracks that were already there. Carmen had this way of making everything about her. If a client complimented my work, she'd quickly redirect the conversation to how she'd train me. If I suggested a new idea that worked well, it somehow became her innovation by the time she told the story to others. I told myself it didn't matter. She was the boss, the owner, of course she got the credit. There were other little things too, like how she'd make comments about my personal life that felt just a bit too invasive. When I started dating Marcus, she wanted to know everything about him, where he worked, what his family was like, how serious we were getting. She'd say things like, "Just make sure you don't get distracted from your career goals, Layla. Men come and go, but your professional reputation is forever." I should have paid more attention to how she talked about other women who worked for her over the years. There was Jessica, who'd been her assistant before I started. Carmen always spoke about her with this edge of disdain. Jessica got pregnant and just lost all focus, she'd say. Started calling in sick constantly. Couldn't handle the stress of events anymore. I had to let her go for the good of the business. At the time, I thought maybe Jessica really had become unreliable. Now I wonder, when Marcus and I got engaged last year, Carmen's reaction was strange. She congratulated me, of course, but there was something forced about it. She kept asking if I was sure I was ready for marriage, if I'd thought about how it would affect my work. "Marriage changes women," she said one day. While we were reviewing contracts, they start prioritizing their husband's needs over their own ambitions. I've seen it happen so many times. I brushed off her comments. I was happy, in love, excited about my future with Marcus. We had a small wedding last fall, and Carmen even catered it for free as her gift to us. She seemed genuinely happy that day, dancing at the reception, telling everyone how proud she was of me. I thought maybe I'd been reading too much into her earlier comments. The problems really started when I found out I was pregnant in February. Marcus and I had been trying for a few months, so we were over the moon when I saw those 2 pink lines. We decided to wait until I was 12 weeks along to tell people, just to be safe. But I was so excited, I could barely contain myself. I started feeling nauseous around week 6, nothing too severe, just that queasy feeling in the mornings and sometimes in the afternoons. I tried to hide it at work, but Carmen noticed everything. She had this way of watching people, cataloging their behavior. When I excused myself to the bathroom more frequently or turned down coffee, I could feel her eyes on me one morning in early March. I was reviewing the menu for a wedding we were catering that weekend, when a wave of nausea hit me hard. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. When I came back to the office, Carmen was sitting at my desk, looking through the papers I'd been working on. "Everything okay?" she asked, but her tone wasn't concerned. It was suspicious. "Just something I ate," I said, trying to sound casual. She stared at me for a long moment. "You know, Layla, If there's something going on in your personal life that might affect your work, I need to know about it. This business depends on reliability." I wasn't ready to tell her yet. Marcus and I had agreed to wait until after my first doctor's appointment the following week, so I just said I was fine and tried to focus on work. But Carmen's behavior toward me shifted after that day. She started questioning my decisions more, double-checking work I'd been handling independently for years. She'd make comments about my energy levels or ask if I was feeling up to handling certain events. When I finally told her I was pregnant at 13 weeks, her reaction was not what I expected. I'd imagined she might be happy for me, maybe even excited about becoming a great aunt. Instead, she just nodded slowly and said, "I see. Well, we'll need to discuss how this affects your responsibilities here." That conversation happened on a Thursday afternoon in her office. I remember the way the sunlight was coming through her blinds, casting these harsh lines across her desk. She had her hands folded in front of her, and she was looking at me like I'd just told her I had a terminal illness. "Congratulations, of course," she said, but it sounded rehearsed. "When are you due?" "October 15th, I said. "But Carmen, I want you to know that this doesn't change my commitment to the business. I'm planning to work right up until the baby comes, and I'll only need a few weeks off afterward." She raised an eyebrow. "A few weeks? Layla, do you have any idea what having a baby actually entails? The sleepless nights, the constant demands? You can't just pop back to work like nothing happened." I felt my cheeks burn. I know it'll be an adjustment, but plenty of women manage to balance motherhood and careers. I'm not planning to just abandon everything I've worked for here. She said, leaning back in her chair. "We'll see about that." Over the next few weeks, things got progressively worse. Carmen started excluding me from client meetings I'd normally attend. She said she didn't want me to overexert myself, but I could tell she was worried about how I'd appear to clients. She made comments about my appearance, suggesting I might want to wear looser clothing to events so clients wouldn't be distracted by my condition. The breaking point came in early April. We were catering a big corporate event, and I was managing the setup as usual. I was about 16 weeks pregnant by then, barely showing, feeling great. I'd been working events like this for 3 years without any problems, but Carmen kept hovering, questioning every decision I made. When one of the servers called in sick an hour before the event, I stepped in to help serve, like I'd done countless times before. It wasn't unusual, we all pitched in wherever needed, but Carmen pulled me aside and said, "Absolutely not, you're not serving tonight." "Why not?" I asked. "I feel fine, and we're short-staffed." "Because you're pregnant, Layla. What if you trip? What if you spill something on a client? What if you have one of your nausea episodes in front of everyone? I can't take that risk." I was humiliated. The other staff members were watching, and I could see the confusion on their faces. I'd been working these events longer than most of them, and suddenly I was being treated like I was fragile and incompetent. That night, Marcus found me crying in our kitchen when I got home. I told him what happened, and he was furious. "She can't treat you like that," he said. "Being pregnant doesn't make you disabled. You have rights." But I didn't want to make waves. Carmen was family. I kept thinking things would get better once she adjusted to the idea of my pregnancy. I told myself she was just worried about the business, that her reaction came from a place of caring. Even if she wasn't expressing it well, I was so wrong. In May, Carmen called me into her office for what she said was a performance review. I'd never had a formal review before. She'd always just given me feedback casually. But suddenly, she had this folder full of documentation about my work over the past few months. She went through it item by item. Times I'd been late to work because of morning sickness. Days I'd seemed distracted or low energy. A client complained about a minor issue with table settings that had been resolved immediately. She made it sound like I'd become completely unreliable, like my pregnancy had turned me into a different person. "I'm concerned about your ability to handle your current responsibilities," she said. "Maybe we should consider reducing your role temporarily, just until after the baby comes." "Reducing my role how?" I asked. "Well, you could focus more on administrative tasks, less client interaction, no event management. We could adjust your salary accordingly, of course." I felt like I'd been slapped. She was essentially demoting me and cutting my pay because I was pregnant. "Carmen, my performance hasn't actually declined. I've been doing the same quality work I've always done. You're just treating me differently because of the pregnancy." Her face hardened. "Layla, I think you're being emotional about this. Pregnancy hormones can affect judgment, you know. I'm trying to help you here, to find a way to keep you employed despite the challenges your condition presents. My condition, like pregnancy, was some kind of disease. I should have quit right then. I should have walked out and never looked back. But I needed the job. Marcus and I had just bought a house, we had medical bills, and we were trying to save money for the baby. I couldn't afford to be unemployed while pregnant, so I swallowed my pride and accepted the demotion. The next 3 months were torture. Carmen moved me to a tiny office in the back of the building and gave most of my responsibilities to Jake, a guy she'd hired fresh out of college with no catering experience. I watched him struggle with tasks I could have handled in my sleep, but Carmen was endlessly patient with his mistakes. When he messed up a major client order in June, she just laughed it off and said, "Learning curve." Meanwhile, she scrutinized everything I did. If I took a bathroom break, she'd comment on how long I was gone. If I ate a snack at my desk, she'd make remarks about maintaining professionalism. She started scheduling staff meetings during my lunch break, and then acting surprised when I couldn't attend. The other employees didn't know how to react. Some of them tried to be supportive, asking how I was feeling or offering to help with tasks, but I could tell they were confused about why my role had changed so dramatically. A few of the newer staff members started treating me like I was less important, following Carmen's lead. I felt so isolated and ashamed. I started dreading going to work every day. I'd sit in my car in the parking lot some mornings, trying to work up the courage to walk into that building. Marcus kept encouraging me to look for another job, but who wants to hire someone who's 7 months pregnant? I felt trapped. The final blow came in August. I was 32 weeks pregnant, working quietly in my back office, when Carmen appeared in my doorway with an envelope in her hand. She didn't even sit down. "Layla, I'm sorry, but I have to let you go," she said. "The business is going through some restructuring, and we need to eliminate your position." I stared at her. Eliminate my position, but Jake is doing all my old work now. Jake's role is different, more suited to our current needs. "Carmen, you can't fire me for being pregnant. That's illegal." She smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "I'm not firing you for being pregnant, Layla. I'm terminating your employment due to performance issues and business needs. I have documentation to support that decision." That folder she'd been building since May. She'd been planning this all along. "You're my aunt," I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. "You're supposed to support me, especially now." "This isn't personal, Layla. It's business. I can't let family relationships interfere with what's best for the company." She handed me the termination letter and told me to clean out my desk. Security would escort me out. Security, like I was some kind of threat. I called Marcus from the parking lot, sobbing so hard I could barely speak. He left work immediately and came to get me. That night, we talked about filing a lawsuit, but the lawyer we consulted said it would be difficult to prove. Carmen had been careful to document everything in a way that made it look like legitimate performance issues. Fighting it would be expensive and stressful, and there was no guarantee we'd win. For weeks after that, I barely left the house. I felt like such a failure. How had I let this happen? How had I not seen it coming? I kept replaying every interaction with Carmen, looking for signs I'd missed, wondering if I could have handled things differently. The worst part was how it affected my relationship with the rest of my family. Carmen was the matriarch, the successful one everyone looked up to. When word got out about what happened, the family was divided. Some people believed her version of events, that I'd become unreliable and she'd had no choice but to let me go. Others were sympathetic, but didn't want to take sides and cause family drama. My mom tried to stay neutral, which hurt almost as much as Carmen's betrayal. "There are always two sides to every story," she said, when I told her what really happened. "Maybe you both could have handled things better." Both of us? Like I was equally responsible for my own discrimination? The baby came in October, a beautiful little girl we named Sophia. I should have been completely happy, but I was still carrying all this anger and hurt. Every time someone asked about my maternity leave, or when I was going back to work, I had to explain that I'd been fired. It was humiliating. Marcus was amazing through all of it. He picked up extra hours at his job to cover our expenses. and he never once made me feel bad about losing my income. But I could see the stress wearing on him too. We'd planned for me to take a few months off with the baby, not to be unemployed indefinitely. I started job hunting when Sophia was 3 months old, but it was harder than I'd expected. There was a gap in my employment history I had to explain, and I was terrified of giving Carmen as a reference. When potential employers called her, what would she say? Would she sabotage my chances at other jobs too? The turning point came last month. I was at the grocery store with Sophia when I ran into Jessica, Carmen's former assistant. We'd never really talked when I worked there. She'd been gone for over a year before I started. But she recognized me and came over to say hello. "I heard what happened," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry. Carmen did the same thing to me." We ended up talking for an hour in that grocery store parking lot. Jessica told me her story, and it was almost identical to mine. The scrutiny, the documentation, the gradual demotion, and finally the termination. She'd been too ashamed and exhausted to fight it at the time, especially with a newborn to care for. "She has a pattern," Jessica said. "I've heard from other women who worked for her over the years. She can't handle the idea that women might have priorities beyond her business. In her mind, getting pregnant is a betrayal of everything she's built." Hearing that was like a light bulb going off. This wasn't about my performance or my value as an employee. This was about Carmen's own issues with motherhood and family. She'd chosen her business over having children, and she couldn't tolerate employees making a different choice. Jessica also told me something that made my blood boil. After I was fired, Carmen hired 2 new people to handle the work I'd been doing. 2 people, with a combined salary higher than what she'd been paying me. So much for budget constraints and restructuring. That conversation with Jessica changed everything for me. I realized I'd been carrying shame that wasn't mine to carry. I hadn't failed. I'd been systematically pushed out by someone who was supposed to love and support me. I'm not the same person I was a year ago. I'm not that eager to please young women who just wanted her aunt's approval. I've started my own small event planning business, working from home while Sophia naps. It's growing slowly, but it's mine. I make the decisions, I set the policies, and I'll never treat another woman the way Carmen treated me. I haven't spoken to Carmen since the day she fired me. She sent a baby gift when Sophia was born, a silver rattle with an impersonal card that said, "Congratulations." I donated it to charity. I don't want anything from her in my daughter's life. Some family members think I should forgive and move on, that holding on to anger isn't healthy. But this isn't about anger anymore. It's about boundaries. It's about teaching my daughter that she doesn't have to accept misogyny or discrimination, even from family. I want her to know that her worth isn't tied to someone else's approval or success. I think about the lessons I want to pass on to Sophia. I want her to be strong, to stand up for herself, and to recognize when someone is trying to undermine her. I want her to know that it's okay to walk away from toxic relationships, even if they come from people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. Every time I look at her, I feel a mix of hope and determination. I want to create a world for her where she can thrive, where she can chase her dreams without fear of being judged or belittled. I want her to know that she can be both a mother and a professional, that she can have it all on her own terms. I still have moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice by cutting ties with Carmen, but then I remember how she made me feel, how she treated me during one of the most vulnerable times in my life. I remind myself that I deserve better, that I deserve to be surrounded by people who uplift me, not tear me down. As I sit here reflecting on everything, I realize that this journey has been about more than just losing a job. It's been about reclaiming my identity, my power, and my future. I won't let anyone take that away from me again. I won't let my daughter grow up thinking that she has to choose between family loyalty and her own happiness. So I keep moving forward, one day at a time. I keep building my business, nurturing my daughter, and healing from the wounds of betrayal. I know that I'm stronger than I ever thought possible, and I will continue to fight for what I believe in, for myself, for Sophia, and for every woman who has ever felt silenced or diminished. This is my story, and I will carry it with me as a reminder of where I've been and how far I've come. I will not let it define me, but I will let it fuel my fire to create a better future for myself and my daughter.